Welcome to Skytalkers. Here are your hosts, Charlotte and Caitlin.
Hello, and welcome to Skytalkers. I'm your host, Charlotte.
Hey, everyone. I'm your other host, Caitlin, and welcome to this week's episode where we are talking all about the fourth episode of The Acolyte called Day, which aired on June 18th. It was directed by Alex Garcia Lopez, and it was written by Claire Keichel and Cor Adana. This was a very fun episode.
I loved this one. I feel like it stands out of all the four that we've already had.
Yeah.
And I can't believe we're halfway through the series, first off. This one, I mean, the cliffhanger was so intense.
It was so
the horror
good.
elements were so good.
I was watching it, and if you've been listening to our coverage of The Acolyte, you know that Charlotte and I had screeners up until this week's show. But we watched the third and fourth episodes like very late at night at 2 a.m. And I was astounded at how much I did not remember.
I forgot everything.
Day.
Forgot everything.
Literally, the only thing I remembered was that Kalnaka died and the hanger ending. But I was watching it thinking, did I pay attention at all? Because this feels like the first time.
I know, and which is good,
Yeah, it is.
because it informed our earlier discussions and let us speculate a little bit more wildly, because I felt the same way.
Yeah.
And it was fun going back and like experiencing it kind of new. I don't know. So we obviously loved it. I was going to ask you what you think, but
That's
it's
what
good.
I think. Yeah.
How does this rank for you in the four that we've seen?
Oh, that's a good question. It might be number 1.
Me too.
I know we don't love to do rankings here, but
we've definitely done
series
episode rankings before.
Rankings.
Yeah.
Or rather like our favorite from the set. This one, it just, I don't know. I loved the tension of everyone going to Kalnaka, especially at the end when we hear Mae scream when she's setting the trap for Chimera, right? But everyone has heard her, including the Jedi. And I loved that kind of race for everyone trying to find out where she is. And then we have Bazil, our little tracker alarm, who ends up running into her and finding her. And I really loved that tension and kind of you can kind of start to see how the chips are gonna, I was gonna say you can see how things are gonna spiral out, but I don't know if I fully believe that myself.
I mean, I feel like we know by the end of this one that people are gonna die.
Yeah, well, I guess I was thinking of Mae, really, and she's had this revelation of Osha is the one I'm loyal to. This does change everything, and she's ready to turn herself into Kalnaka, but he's dead when she gets there, but who's going to believe that, And it's kind of setting up that tension of we cleared Osha's name a couple weeks ago, and now are the Jedi going to be as willing, someone like Sol going to be as willing to work with Mae to clear her name in the same way? When Mae inevitably says, I didn't do it, what is Sol going to say back? It's going to be a similar type of scene, or is it, Ooh, juicy.
Definitely. I do feel like this is part 1 of 2 in terms of the title convention. Oh my God. I feel like we have spent a lot of time now discussing being right and wrong in the history of the show,
in the history of Skytalkers.
Whether or not, the history of Skytalkers, on whether or not artists stick with the title naming conventions of their show. I mean, we have The Mandalorian, which does.
Not fully. It's got some
Not fully, but it generally does. Let's be honest. It has a style.
It's the closest.
And yeah, the no slash in this one really threw me, but then the name Day feels so plain in a lot of ways that it feels like next episode is going to be dark, especially because the sun's set in this really ominous way. So if we could combine both this one and the next, and if that naming convention is true, maybe we're back to the slash situation that we got first. But sure. But when I saw it, I was like, oh God.
I think this is a really curious title, just thinking about what it could mean. Day, dawn, light, is the sun is rising, there's clarity, and perhaps it's kind of the title is applying to Mae in this sense of her deciding to not continue on with her deal with the master at the end. So maybe it's really about her. I also thought of Dusk as a possible title if we're going to keep with the day or the D. We've got Destiny, Day, Dusk, Dark. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll see. Maybe we don't even need to spend time speculating about it. But I do think, I do think the day, the light, there is so much clarity that you see with Mae. I guess she has a major realization throughout, like in this episode, about how maybe she's on the wrong path, and that seeing Osha alive really does change everything for her, and that whatever love she has for her sister and that connection and the fact that they are so bonded really grounds her fully, right? I mean, she's not in the trap.
Well, let's talk about Mae and Osha, since we've kind of already started talking about them. I think that in last week's show, it was all about them as children, right? And the relationship that they had. And we spent a lot of time talking about the differences in how they view each other and how they view their relationship. And I think even now in the present, it's very much the same. The fact that Mae at the end says, I don't need to keep this deal. You were wrong. Osha being alive changes everything. My loyalty is to Osha, not your master. What I'm going to do is surrender myself to Kalnaka and then turn myself into the Jedi. And I think that this very much keeps in line with the Mae we saw in the past on Brendok, of, when she's talking to Osha about them doing the ascension ceremony, and she's saying things like, I don't have the exact quotes pulled up in front of me right now, but everything I need is here. I am you. I give you, you give me me. We are one and the same. We go through this together. For her, that's what matters, even to the point of her saying, I won't let you leave me. I will kill you before I let that happen, right? The very dark place that she got to at the end of last week's show. So I think for her to kind of drop everything seemingly here in this instance with Chimere in the forest and this whole deal that she's made with the master, which I think that verbiage of deal is also very interesting. I don't think we've talked a lot about that. Or really heard that term to describe all of their relationships with each other. So for her to kind of drop everything, it tells me that she's still very much in the same place. And I think in a lot of ways, Osha is as well. I think that was kind of the tricky thing we were seeing from her last week as a child, where, she was upset to leave her mother Anastasia, Mama. And while she had a lot of conflict and struggles with Mae, it always felt from a place of, how can I exist on my own without always being us, right? Is there a way to be your sister but be my own person? And I don't think that Osha really saw a way to do that, and led to her to make the decision to leave. But when it hit the fan, right, when the literally Brendok is caving in around them, that's the person she's trying to reach to. And I think Osha has a lot of interesting conversations with the different characters throughout this episode, with Soul, with Yorn, and with Jackie, all about her relationship to Mae. And I think what she says, I believe it's to Jackie, when her and Jackie are talking about death and loss, she says, I couldn't accept what I'd lost, how unfair it felt, the resentment I felt for my sister, even though I missed her at the same time. I think that perfectly kind of encapsulates Osha's relationship to Mae, whereas Mae, I think, has shown what she said, right, that everything does change. Like, my loyalty is 100% to Osha now. Nothing has changed for me. I think that's kind of always been true. Like, it feels like everything that Osha, or that Mae has been doing, has been because of her feeling the need to revenge, to seek vengeance on what happened to her sister and the rest of her family. So I thought that all of their conversations, each of the sisters, about each other, was really enlightening.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we need to spend a little bit more time on the deal. So this is the first time we've heard that Mae, I could be wrong about that, but this is the first time it feels very real, in which she has made a deal with the master. And I feel like if I understood anything before about the relationship that Mae had with this unknown Darksider, could call it a Sith, could not, I thought it was just to advance power. I didn't realize it was... Like, I thought it was a master-apprentice relationships, but now understanding a deal and her thinking that Osha was dead, it makes me think what that deal potentially was. And so I have some theories. Here's my off-the-wall theory. I feel like maybe, if just to go back to how we're comparing all of this stuff about forced children, forced creation, saving lives, things like that, to the Revenge of the Sith, and the whole concept that what Palpatine was telling Anakin about. And the reason why Anakin turned to the dark side was to save Padme, to find the power to cheat death and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if the master offered Mae somehow to bring her sister or her clan entirely back to life through some sort of dark magic that needed to happen through dark deeds in which Mae had to carry out, which would be these 4 Jedi. It just reminds me of, I think that would sort of parallel what was happening with Palpatine and Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, when, you know, Anakin's like, I'll do whatever you ask. And Palpatine says, okay, wipe out the Jedi, go to the Jedi temple, and then the whole Order 66 and all.
Yeah.
There is something that it needs to be exchanged here for it to be called a deal.
Yeah.
It's not just you will become my apprentice or something. I mean, it could be, but I do think there's something else at stake here that she feels a need for. So the immediate shift that Osha is alive would really put all of that off the table, right? What do you think about that? Do you have any theories?
No, I think this was a really good theory. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially because there were so many parallels to Anakin when we had, you know, our flashbacks on Brendok. I think that to continue this kind of, that there are people out there in the galaxy that will do anything to bring someone back from the dead, making a deal with the devil. Anakin does it. To think that Anakin is the only one that's going to go to lengths like that in the galaxy, I think it makes sense to see a similar story here, and especially to have it contained within the Jedi too, and is that, you know, both of these are intersecting with the Jedi, I think is really smart when we're thinking about the larger story of the Jedi and how they will continue to conceal things through the years. And will they be able to see history, if this is what's happening, right? Will they be able to see history repeating itself in someone like Anakin? And the answer is no, because the rest of
they don't.
The Star Wars not gonna happen.
Yeah. The dark side clouds everything.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, we got a little bit of that vibe here in this episode where we had the Jedi Council meeting. This I thought was such an interesting scene, getting to hear a little bit more of the bureaucracy and the structure of the Jedi Order. Last time we saw Vernestra, she insisted that Sol go back to the temple to discuss how to handle the situation with Mae. And so we hear them all talking about what to do, who has trained Mae, and then they talk about how they should inform the High Council. And we get this really fascinating bureaucratic conversation from Vernestra where she says the High Council would be obliged to inform the Senate. A scandal like this would inspire fear and mistrust. We should handle this ourselves. We must learn who trained her. And again, we've been talking about this a lot this season, but the entanglement of the Jedi and politics, the Republic, the Senate, is part of what brings about their demise, and that they are still so deeply entrenched and entangled together, even as far back, you know, here in the past, and what we saw throughout the High Republic book series as well, that this is all part of the larger story of the galaxy and the eventual rise of the Empire. And it makes sense to keep seeing this relationship between the Jedi and the politicians, even in this time frame, because like these things don't just happen overnight. And with a character like Palpatine, right? Like he seeds these things for generations, basically. But it's because he's able to do that because, you know, this situation exists here in the time of the Acolyte as well. You know, I just thought it was a really interesting conversation. Also, that they talked about the fact that Mae could be in a splinter order.
Yeah.
The concept of a splintered Jedi order is fascinating.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that will be explored or has already, and I'm not aware of it. It just makes sense to me that would happen.
Right.
That people would disagree with the quote unquote High Council and then go off and do their own thing, but still want to use the Force in the same way that the Jedi do. I feel like I really liked the scene. I really liked seeing Vernestra here. I wasn't sure how I felt about Vernestra earlier and her characterization here, but here I felt like I wasn't sure how I felt about Vernestra's characterization in this show versus what we know from the books and everything. I don't know. She's older here, so a lot has changed.
Like very young in the books.
Yes, exactly. But she seems so serious here, and I really liked it. She, to me, her analog in this series is a Yoda figure, but clearly Yoda is probably on the quote unquote High Council, and she is not. So I feel like something that we just haven't talked about on our podcast enough is that there's a potential for this group of people that we see here to keep whatever happens in the next 4 episodes under wraps. Already there was a great secret with what happened with Mae and Osha on their home planet with the witches, right? There's a lot of secrecy. Several of these people who were witness perhaps went a little crazy, went into eternal meditation. And I feel like so already we're starting with secrecy here, and then we're not even on the High Council. So I think when we flash forward to the prequels, it makes sense that there is probably a big conspiracy or a reason to hide things that happens here that either makes the Jedi look really bad, probably makes the Jedi look really bad.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if Vernestra is part of that, given the fact that I think she is the most straight-laced person here, right? At least the most serious. You need to come back. We need to figure it out. Her saying to Sol, your personal connection to her and her sister is not a benefit here, I thought was so interesting. And just another way of saying like your attachment is too real and you need to relax.
Yeah. Or that there could be a situation where the personal connection is the benefit. And they're using it, which is what basically what Sol does.
That will be
what Sol does with Osha when he asks her to come on the mission.
The personal connection is a benefit, is sort of the theme of Star Wars and like the entire reason why Anakin turned back from the dark side in Return of the Jedi. So,
the personal connection,
The personal connection. So I think her saying that is sort of cluing us in that that'll probably be good. But boy, I really do think that we're heading to learning something about Sol that we do not want to learn. By the way,
I'm not ready.
Him telling Osha that he will explain everything. Like, here's what he says to Osha. Sol says that he doesn't want Osha to face Mae. He says, you're not going to face her. You're going to face your past. Both of us will. Once we get Mae safely to the ship, I'll explain everything. I promise. Sol, explain what?
Exactly.
What do we need to explain?
I thought we were on the up and up, Sol.
No, we didn't.
We did not.
We did not
trust him.
I just trust him implicitly, but then also it's just I'm not ready to learn something bad about some mistake that he made and then having to forgive that. I think I'll probably get to that point, but
what did we talk about? It's going to be very similar. It could be very similar to the revelation about Luke in The Last Jedi. Yeah. So I think we should prepare ourselves for that.
I'm prepared. Just him even saying that, I'm like, oh, geez, there's something to explain.
I think it's you compare this conversation with Osha versus a little bit more of this conversation with Vernestra after I guess they're not the High Council, the Medium Council, the Small Council. I don't know.
The Lower Council?
The Lower Council. But Vernestra is angry at him, right? She's like, how could you not tell me that there was a chance Mae survived? She says this poor girl survived, which is a little, it's compassionate, I think, or it's empathetic towards Mae's situation, I think, a little bit, even understanding how angry Vernestra is. And Sol is so certain. He was like, I saw her fall. I definitely would have told you if I thought she had lived. I didn't think so. But now he's got something to explain to Osha and Mae. It's important, I think, to note that he says, once we get Mae back on the ship safely, I'll explain it to both of you. It's not something he wants to tell them individually, which I think is very interesting. And he also is the one who is certain that there is still good in Mae, right? He's, he's got his Padme line of there is still good in her, the part of her that loves you. And I believe him. I believe him that
Luke
he
Skywalker
believes that.
Line too, okay? Luke Skywalker line too.
It is. Okay. Padme, yes.
I know. I feel like we were talking about Luke. I had to bring that up too.
Yeah, no, you're right. There was one more thing I wanted to say about when you were talking about the Jedi and how they're going to conceal this. I fully think that that's where this series ends. I've been thinking of that for a couple of weeks, actually, that whatever happens here, whatever the outcome, the finale is, I think that it will be concealed. I think that is the MO of the Jedi Order kind of throughout time, honestly, which we've seen in a number of occasions. And I will remind our audience, or let our audience know if they don't know, that the Jedi in many different Star Wars stories, the Jedi archives hold a myriad of secrets. And they hold so much in there. And there are a lot of levels of the Jedi archives that are not accessible to certain types of Jedi or other people, and definitely not the public, not even the politicians. And it's been a while since I brought up this book or audio drama, but in the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, which is
I'm so proud of you for getting that title correct.
I hesitated in my brain. I was like,
I could hear you saying it so carefully.
The audiobook is called Dooku Jedi Lost, but I infamously on the podcast always say Jedi Lost Dooku.
No, you say, I don't know what you say. It's a mixed match of those.
I say it incorrectly. Even now I'm like, is that what that audiobook is called?
I know, I'm second guessing it too.
Someone do a quick Google. But in that audiobook, it's about when Count Dooku it's part of his like Padawan when he's actually still a Jedi story. And part of what happens in that audio drama is he uncovers that there's like a basement level to the Jedi temple. It's been a minute, but there's like this huge basement temple, and there's like all these hidden secrets basically down in this temple in the basement of the temple, like a secondary archive where they just kind of, I don't know, have been hiding things essentially. And I think there's like Sith artifacts down there as well. Yeah. And it's things they don't talk about. It's things that no one else knows about. I'm sure it's a lot of things that even people on the council don't know about. And
Absolutely.
It's just this constant concealment from the Jedi Order. So I really do think that whatever happens here will be covered up. And even what we were talking about with Vernestra and the way that she talks about the public's perception of the Jedi, they don't want to tell anyone anything because then it becomes public. And if it becomes public, what does she say? It would inspire fear and mistrust, a scandal. And even, when the Acolyte first premiered and they were going after Osha, she was talking about how their justice has to be swift. We can't let it get out that another Jedi murdered one of our own, So it's definitely going to be covered up. That's the thesis statement here. It's definitely going to be covered up.
We do have an episode about the theme of concealment in Star Wars. It's super old. I'll link it though in the show notes if you want to go back to it. I'm sure a lot has changed the Star Wars universe. I haven't listened to it in a while.
Pre-Rise of Skywalker, a lot has changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to go back to Soul saying, I'll explain everything, because I think I just created a numbered list about what he needs to explain or what the story needs to explain to us. Okay. That he could provide a lot of answers to. Okay.
Okay.
All right, ready for my numbered list?
Yes.
Number 1, what he knows about Mae and Osha's origins. Mm-hmm. And I bring this up because one of the first shots that we see in this particular episode is Kelnaka's little bunk, which I think is designed so well. And you know what it immediately reminded me of? Ewok movie with Wilford Brimley and his little house.
Yes.
Wilford Brimley's little house.
Yes.
In the Ewok adventure movies. I don't know if anyone else felt that way. I haven't seen that mentioned at all online. I was waiting for it. Anyway.
Write the tweet you want to see.
In the world. Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah.
I'll write it after this. Okay. Regardless of that, the symbols that are all over his little house, Kelnaka's house, are basically like yin and yang motifs. They're a little different than what's on Mae's head and what the witch's symbol is. It's the same sort of concept, but it really does look a little bit like Prime Jedi to me. Some of those concept art that we saw for The Last Jedi about Prime Jedi and the yin and yang, the dyad of it all. So I do think that potentially what could be explained is what they know about Osha and Mae and what they think they know about Osha and Mae and why the Jedi were intrigued with the witches. Okay. Number 2, what fully happened that night. I feel like that's implicit. I feel like we still don't know. Obviously, that was not going to be discussed this week. And why did some people go crazy, including Kelnaka? It seems like Kelnaka went a little rogue. Number 3, why did they cover it up? What was it that they just decided that they weren't going to speak about this at all?
What was the correct, right, when Master Torpin says we thought we were doing the right thing?
The right thing. Why did they think they were doing the right thing?
Yeah.
What is that? And I think that has to lead into Mae and Osha's origins, or my next point, which is number 4, why the witches were exiled to begin with. So if they thought they were doing the right thing, maybe they thought they were rescuing children from an exiled like cult community, right? something like that, a misuse of the Force or something. There's so many things that need to be explained, and we're only halfway through, and I do think they will be explained. In my head, since Sol is the sole survivor at this point, oh my God, of this, he has the firsthand knowledge of what they thought they were doing, what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to hear what he has to say about that. And then also potentially what other Jedi who potentially received a report about what happened, because they did show up at the Jedi temple on Coruscant, right, with Osha in hand. So
yeah,
there had to be some sort of explainer somehow. So there's a lot there. I don't know. I feel like just to return a little bit to the Kilnaka situation, seeing these symbols and the evolution of the symbol really made me think that it just made me go back to this concept of like, it is so intriguing that Mae and Osha were conceived of the Force potentially, and that there could be within the Jedi Order people who were convinced of their chosen one status, or like something completely separate, like the dyad unseen for generations. I don't know. I could see there being a sort of worship for that like miracle in a lot of ways.
well,
that could
possibly
come from
even
that.
within these splinter orders. How often is this happening? Is a splinter order treated the same way as the witch coven when it comes to using the Force? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions there. I think
Totally.
to keep talking about Kalnaka, a couple weeks ago we were discussing how, our 4 Jedi who Mae is hunting, they all have very, half of them seem pretty well adjusted, and the other half not so much, with Torben and Kalnaka. But the interesting thing about Kalnaka is that Kalnaka has only been off the grid for a year. They mentioned that Yord, I don't know if I can find the quote, but he basically says that Kalnaka was sent to be posted here on Kofar, I think the planet is called, but no one's heard from him in over a year, and that he's been unresponsive to their warning transmissions. So again, Torben was in this eternal
State
meditation
for 10 years.
Yeah. But Kalnaka has only been off the grid for a year. And then Indara and Sol, again, relatively well adjusted in the grand scheme of things. So what happened a year ago as well that would have sent Kalnaka off the grid? And is that when he started drawing all of these drawings in his home?
I do wonder if there's some sort of commentary somehow with these 4 Jedi on the different stages of grief and how each of these people deal with whatever happened on that planet.
Yeah.
Like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I don't know which is which, but I think that there's definitely some denial, there's definitely some anger, there's definitely some depression, and there's fully some acceptance. So I don't know. But there's fully some grief too, right? I feel like Sol has so much grief around what happened.
Yeah.
So much so that he's looking at old holograms of Osha. There's another question that I'm just going to bring up here and not really dwell on is, why did Osha leave the Jedi Order?
Yep.
We don't know that yet. We found out nothing about that. And I wonder if we are going to. I feel like it's a big piece here. And that's potentially another question that Sol can answer, but unsure.
Yeah. The other piece too that comes up is about Osha's Force sensitivity. She starts talking in this week's show about how she is starting to sense things again. I think she even says, I think she says, I can sense things again in a way I couldn't before.
Yeah.
And it's giving her the courage to confront Mae or something like that. And this was something we saw, in the very first episode of her not being able to call Pip with the Force, seemingly not being able to use the Force. So what is it that happened? What is coming back to her? How is this potentially her Force sensitivities coming back to her? Is that part of why she left? I think that's still a huge outstanding question with Osha. Not
only that, where she feels that sensitivity to the Force is with like a bug-like creature on these trees. Oh my God, so nasty. These huge slug things.
Giant.
they're so awful. It's like actually worst nightmare fuel for me. I hate bugs. So I just like, oh my God. That whole scene feels like foreshadowing somehow, but also just made me think about how the opening scene in the previous episode was about how Osha was controlling and hurting a butterfly with the Force. And then Mae did the same thing. And here we have her awakening to the Force with another bug, learning that these bugs are attracted to the light and things like that, which is very moth-like. These are giant slug moth things. It definitely feels like it's going to come back around in the next episode, especially if it's all in the dark.
It's gotta, because it definitely felt, to me, the scene felt a little random.
Me too. I totally agree.
Especially when at the end when Soul slashes it and Jackie goes, he went right to the lightsaber, and then Yord in the background, they're attracted to the light, and then the scene.
I know.
Like,
it was really giving prequels in like honestly the best way, but I totally agree. And it just was like, okay, so that's gonna come back around.
Yeah, things have. You're telling me only one of them woke up.
Yeah,
there's always a bigger bug.
Yeah, fully. Yeah, but I do think that there is definitely a connection there of controlling the butterfly and potentially controlling this huge moth. I mean, what is a butterfly if not a moth, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, it does look like it's in a cocoon, and the fact that Osha touches it, that's the one that wakes up. She sensed it, so maybe she woke it up. So then is she coming out of her cocoon? It's waking something up inside her. You know, that we've got some metaphors going on. It's attracted to the light. It's
potentially like super simple, and it is very much on the nose, and I love it.
I'm here for it. Yeah.
Okay, we need to talk about Bazil.
Basil.
Okay. They really hyped up this character.
His name is Bazil. I loved when Yord specified that. It was so funny.
Yord is just the funniest, the best. He's the source of all the laughs for me. I really love him. I am part of the Yord horde.
100%. Me too.
So happy to be here. Star Wars, send me a sticker. Like, I don't know what I used to do.
Me too. Me too.
I think this character is so cool. When we were watching him in the screeners, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
We paused it. We were like, wait a second, who was that?
who was that? And the way that they just set up this character was so joyous too, because there was so much like even Osha being like, is he or they with us? I loved that. I thought it was
so
really funny. And
her delivery was really funny as well. The comedic
fully mimicked. Yeah, it was perfect. It fully mimicked what I was thinking in terms of the character too. So it was great to have that voice. I have tweeted this. I thought that his name Bazil was inspired potentially by Basil Rathbone, who played one of the classic Sherlock Holmeses. And since Bazil is a finder, like a detective, it felt right. And I don't know if that's confirmed, but it just seems right.
Absolutely. Even if we're thinking about the Great Mouse Detective.
Okay, I have something to admit. I've never seen The Great Mouse Detective.
I've never seen it either, but I know about it, and
I know that character's name is Bazil because of Basil Rathbone.
Exactly.
Right?
So I think I think we're connecting the dots.
The dots are so there.
That's honestly what I thought of.
And I was like, I went really far back into Basil Rathbone, and I didn't think about The Great Mouse Detective, but I'm sure it is that. I just have never seen that.
I think it's both. Yeah. There's a line. We can draw the line.
Yeah, in our whodunit, it's fun to have like a Sherlock Holmesy character. Yeah. Not that he is a Sherlock Holmesy character, he's not, but he really is the tracker. Yeah. Going off the clues, sniffing it out. Letting out the largest scream.
I love it. Must be in his protocol as well that when he finds something, he didn't chase Mae, right? He stands in the same spot, like, this is where I was, come here to this location. I love him being a little alarm bell. And the fact that Yord chose to study, I forget what his language is. It's like Tinian or Taian or something like that.
This is a character from the EU, by the way. This species. Didn't know that. Love that for everyone who's
fans.
an EU reader.
Yeah, me too. But the fact that Yord talks about how he studied Bazil's language when everyone else was studying Shriwook.
I'm obsessed.
I want to do something more nuanced.
Like, okay, Yord.
Got it. Overachiever. And when he's giving his briefing and he wants to make sure everyone's paying attention. And I also thought the component of having this group of Jedi on this mission, but the only thing we really see them do is stand around. Like when Jackie is asking if the creature who lives on the planet has seen a Wookiee, and they're all just standing there. And then when they're all going in a line down through the forest following Bazil, I just thought it was so funny, honestly, because you have all these Jedi. What are they doing? We're going to talk about the Master, but the Master is presumably creeping around somewhere here as well. No one senses it. It's just, how many Jedi does it take to find another Jedi? You know?
Need a tracker for our tracker.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the Master and the fact that the last 10 minutes of this particular episode, the tone shifted so fast and the music was insane.
Mm-hmm.
It was so good. I think I've mentioned before that Michael Abels did the music for Jordan Peele's horror movies, right? And oh boy, did we get the horror strings, the Bernard Herrmann vibes of, oh my God, it's so unsettling. And I feel like the reveal of, we're saying the Master. I think it's her Master, but I don't know if it's the Master, right? Like I just want to be very clear about that in this Sith or dark side order. I have no idea what the structure is, but we'll call him the Master. I hear people calling him Darth Teeth too. I don't know if I'm not fully bought into that, but
the cavity or something like that too.
I don't know. Until we have a name, I'm just gonna call him the Master, like you did too. But when he floats on down,
the floating freaked me the F out. I do not do horror at all. It is not at all my genre, and so I was very scared.
No, I was scared too. I like horror. I don't love horror. I like it. But I was genuinely alarmed and unsettled.
Yeah.
And the fact that when he steps so close to Osha and then the lightsaber igniting, I think it was the first time I've ever actually jumped.
Yeah, me too.
From a lightsaber igniting. I was like, wow, we can still use that as a element of surprise, even though I knew something like that was going to happen. I just didn't know if that lightsaber was going to go straight through her or around her. And I was really terrified there.
Mm-hmm. Even the angle kind of looks like it goes through her, the way it, the angle of the shot, but it doesn't. And then he just flings her to the side. I think there's a really big possibility here that our twins end up swapping, and Mae is now with the Jedi, and Osha gets taken by the Master. Maybe joins them. I know we've definitely speculated about Darkside Osha a number of times here in our coverage, so I think there's a very high possibility for that happening, since he, flicks her off to the side there at the end.
Yeah. Well, if Osha has to face her past, that's what Soul says. What does that mean? And what could the Master offer Osha that now is off the table for Mae? The switcheroo would be a pipe dream for me to happen. And I think for you too, given our years and years of speculation about Rey and Kylo and how we sort of speculated that too, given the yin and yang of their relationship, the dyad of it all.
Yeah.
It would be so cool. And I would love to see that. I feel like here's where we talk about the fact that I think I've thought this for a while. I think the Master is Chimere. I don't know what. He could be someone else.
He's definitely upped the suspiciousness of him in this episode. Everything he said, I was like, Chimere, my guy, who are you?
I love this character so much. He is so attractive. I'm very bought in. Just have to say.
Yeah, same. I'm here. I'm on all of the ships. Every single one.
Really fully on all the ships, as usual.
Right, as usual.
Yeah. I think something I saw floating on the Twitter interwebs that our friend Alex brought up is that there was an interview with Amanda and Manny, and they talk about how they decided to switch places in that scene where Mae traps Chimere. Instead, originally, it was Chimere who's trapping Mae. And Amanda,
isn't it originally it's Mae in the tree? Mae gets caught. So I don't think we should say Chimere trapped Mae.
Absolutely.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know about that. But regardless, there was a switcheroo that happened. And Manny says that it's because both of them thought it was better for each of their characters to have what we have in the show. But there was a switcheroo that happened.
Yeah.
Why did that happen? And I think potentially my theory is that potentially the switcheroo happened because it ups the tension about like you not thinking or thinking that it's Chimere in the mask, that it's his master. Or then you also have a location in which Chimere is trapped. He's hanging upside down. It can't possibly be him. Like there's two clear understandings of like, we know where he is. He has like somewhat of an alibi, but he's also on the planet. So
yeah, it's also loaded. Everything that Mae and him talk about throughout, especially even Mae saying at the end, when she's saying, my loyalty is to Osha now, and she says not to your master. She specifies that now it's your master, Chimere, not mine. And Chimere says, he'll kill you. And she says, yeah, if he can find me, which I don't think even he could do without a guide. And we know that Chimere is the only one who knows where to go. So yes, he's trapped, but also he's the only one presumably that knows where to go. So it would be very ironic, of course, for Mae to say that, not knowing that she's actually talking to the master.
Yeah.
And also, Chimere talks about how he didn't make a deal with the master like Mae did. He just owes the master. And he uses the phrase, he collects people. Just so ominous, so foreboding. I'm so into it. I think he's very suspicious. This is the episode that would convince me that he is the master. And it would be fascinating if that's what happened. It
would be fascinating if it wasn't that too.
Well, exactly. Like then who is he? What does he owe the master? The fact that even their conversation at the beginning where, they're talking about how Chimere mentions that not even bounty hunters come into this forest. And Mae is like, so you risk your life for the master that you don't even owe anything to or have a deal with. And Chimere is like, no, I did it for you. And it's like that. Like, why? Why would you go to all this length for me? And I was thinking about it, too, of Chimere as the master and how to compare him to someone like Palpatine, right? Palpatine put himself in the highest level that he possibly could as Chancellor of the Galactic Republic throughout the second trilogy, the prequels. And so to have that kind of flipped, if we're doing the similar stories, right? With saving someone from dying. We've got these chosen one children, potentially, that kind of verbiage with a potential, born of the Force with Mae and Osha, very similar to Anakin. So if they were to have a Palpatine-like figure and it was Chimere, it would be interesting to have Chimere as the master make himself the bumbling fool who ends up being the puppet master. Whereas Palpatine was like, no, I would like to be at the top and then also the other top.
Yeah. We're at the point of the series, especially a mystery series, when you're in the middle of it, you have the most questions, right? You have the most like, oh my God, it could go this way, it could go this way, it could go this way. And now we're just like, okay, now we wait, especially because we had such an epic cliffhanger.
Right. I saw so many people online were not feeling the cliffhanger. And I'm like, what do you mean? Cliffhangers are the bread and butter of serialized television.
I know. That's what I said too.
I mean,
it's.
Are we surprised there's a cliffhanger?
I know. I feel that way too. And we've been in this cliffhanger for like a month.
Oh, we have. Yeah. So, yeah. Been waiting to see what Soul does next. For 5 weeks now.
And also who dies, because I feel like there's so many spare Jedi that went with them on
Nameless
this trip.
Friends.
Yeah, even the not Plo Koon also in the background. I really thought it was Plo Koon. Caitlin and I for weeks have been like,
Plo Koon.
It's Plo Koon. Potentially it's Dave in the suit. How funny would it be if it was Dave Filoni in the suit?
I think it is still Dave Filoni in the suit. So I'm not letting that go.
It's not Plo Koon, though. Star Wars came out on Twitter and said that it was something else, different name that I did not memorize. And it's not Plo, not Master Plo. I'm okay with that. That to me also leads to the fact that he's probably going to die.
He could die just like Plo Koon dies in the future, later on in the future.
Okay, why'd you remind me of that?
I know.
There's nothing more painful than watching the Clone Wars and then watching Revenge of the Sith and seeing that Plo Koon scene during Order 66.
It's rough. It's so rough.
It's so rough.
Yeah.
It's so rough.
It's very rough.
Anyway, I feel like we are in for a really fun one next week. I am so excited. So excited.
I will say kind of one thing I don't think we talked enough about was kind of Jord and Osha's conversation, because thinking here at the end, one thing I thought was could come up in next week is the fact that Jord has mentioned a couple times in this show that he's worried about Osha's safety. And they talk about that earlier in their conversation together when they're first starting to hunt for Kalnaka, when Jord says it's not that he doesn't want Osha on the mission, he's just concerned about her safety. And when they finally go to where Kalnaka is, he tells her to stand in the back, be behind all of the Jedi. But her being in the back, behind all of them, is then what puts her in the front, right as the Master floats down and across. So I think when I'm thinking about what could happen next week and where has Osha been flung to by the Master, will Mae come and get her? Will Jord come and get her? Sol, who is ultimately going to make it out of that duel? Will the Master end up taking her? And I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up seeing some guilt from Jord if something like that were to happen, because it's clear that he does actually care about Osha. I'm on this ship too. Like I said, I'm on every single ship. And I really liked their conversation about Mae, right? Osha, like we talked about, had multiple conversations with kind of multiple Jedi about how she feels about Mae. And I thought that for as much as we kind of critique the Jedi and, the structure and their bureaucracy and kind of all of the ways, the good ways and the bad ways that they talk about things like attachment and having relationships with others, I thought they all had good advice for Osha regarding what's happening with Mae. And, Osha is talking to Jord in the beginning about how, she can't take the shot. She can't hesitate. She doesn't think she can do it. Jord has to do it, really, so that Mae doesn't kill Sol. I think that's really her big concern here. And Jord is like, no, Master Sol is wise. He thinks that Mae will listen to you. I believe that too. And then when she's like still really kind of upset and doubting herself, Jord says, I've known you since we were younglings. Mae has always been your wound, which I thought was just so kind, because we know from the very first premiere week that Jord was really hurt that he didn't know that Mae was actually Osha's twin. And he was surprised that he didn't know that, which you and I had speculated, could indicate just how close they may or may not have been when they were younger. But then Jord also says, maybe Sol brought you here to face her, but maybe he brought you here to face yourself, which I think is very much in line with what Sol says later. And it felt to me very similar to Mae and Osha's rhyme of I give you you, you give me. To face myself, I have to face you kind of vibes,
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, Jord is great. And I just felt like we hadn't really touched a lot on that conversation. And I thought it was a good one. It was a nice, serious moment between the two of them where they've been not antagonistic towards each other, but, obviously Jord was very suspicious of Mae, of Osha in the beginning. And now he wasn't sure if she should really be on this mission. There's some friction between the two of them. So it was nice to have this moment where he clearly is concerned about her as well, and how that may or may not play out next week as well.
Yeah. I do agree.
Well, is there anything else about Day? Again, such a short name title. Is there anything else about Day we want to talk about today? Sorry.
No, you had to. I just want to say as a comment that I do feel like I really liked this episode. As I said, it's probably my favorite so far. I do think that the pacing was a little off in the middle of it. I found myself, this is how I know, I found myself like looking at my phone for a second and then looking up and being like, oh, I missed a piece. That's not the worst. I just feel like I've seen people talk about the pacing of the episode as a negative, and I kind of see that because of that moment. However, I do think this is potentially like a problem with an 8-episode order of a series. Like, I do think that this was part 1 of part 2 about whatever happens next.
Yeah.
Right. And then in which case, I don't think I would feel this way if I watched both those 2 episodes back to back potentially. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but there's only one way to know, and that would be next week. So
Tune in, come back.
Yeah. So I think that there's one of the writers, Claire Keichel, she talked a little bit about how things got cut from this episode and stuff like that on Twitter, and she's responding to a lot of fans, which is really cool and genuine that someone is willing to talk about their work, especially when it is
in progress.
Such a progress. I was going to say kind of a tough time in fandom for the Acolyte.
Mm-hmm.
We love the show, and if I were a creator, I'd stay way the hell off the internet.
Yep.
So anyway, she is talking about the show and writing the show, and she did mention that some things were cut and in the script phase, it feels like. So I'm interested to see how that serves into next episode too, which she did sort of say that maybe the Acolyte has a writer's room, so I think that she was probably present in most of the writer's rooms anyway. So anyway, that's just that. I just wanted to comment on the pacing of the episode a little bit, but that is it for me with the Acolyte episode 4 Day.
Yeah. I think that's it for me as well. I'm really looking forward to next week. It will actually be Charlotte's birthday when we record next, which is very exciting. But that is going to wrap it up for Skytalkers today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please let us know what you thought about the 4th episode of The Acolyte. You can find us on Twitter/X. The podcast handle is at SkytalkersPod, or our personal handles. Mine is at Caitlin Flesher and Charlotte's is at Crarity. We also have our website, skytalkers.com, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, our email, all good places to find us. And if you have a couple seconds and would like to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would really appreciate it. You can also take a screenshot and share that you're listening in real time and tag us, and we would love to repost that as well. And if you're interested in other ways to support us and how to get involved in real-time discussion with our fabulous Discord whenever a new episode drops, you can head on over to our Patreon and check out our different reward tiers there.
I want to say a huge thank you to these patrons: Allison, Becky, Robin, Jenny, Carol, Kara, Tim, Imbecilius, Emma, Christina, Nick, Paul, Nina, Megan, Tom, Linda, Alexa, Molly, Charlotte, Kelly, Brooke, Kat, David, Gary, Benjamin, Tadashi, Ben, Sophia, Jess, Corey, Simon, Lindsay, GMO, Jenny, and Greg. Thank you so much for supporting us.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And until next time, may the force be with you.
May the force be with you.